Jake Moody on senior day. The senior from nearby Northville, Michigan. This is a 34-yard try from between the hashes. Greg Tarr will snap. Brad Robbins will hold. There's a snap. Moody puts it up. It's up, and it is good! Michigan takes the lead with 9 seconds to go.
JJ hands off. Donovan Edwards, 25-yard line. Cuts upfield at the 20, 15, 10. Still on his feet, 5-yard line. Towards the goal line. Is he in? Yes, sir, he is! Touchdown, Michigan! Donovan Edwards, a magical run to put the Wolverines up by 2 scores.
Second down and goal from the 3 is where they marked it right hash. JJ, a handoff. Khalil puts his head down, drives, end zone, touchdown, Michigan. And in back-to-back years, the Wolverines have put up 42 points at Lucas Oil Stadium in the Big Ten title game.
All right, guys, next up on the podcast, let's bring in a guest that we're all excited to talk to. Came across this stuff on Twitter. He's definitely a follow. You should check out at Zach Linfield. His name is Zach Linfield. He's a student play-by-play guy for the University of Michigan, but I started seeing his clips being shared on Twitter, and we all love, the sock calls, Gus Johnson and Chris Fowler and all the legends. And I got to say, man, you're right up there with some of them, with the Jake Moody and some of the other calls that I've seen shared on Twitter. So first of all, Zach, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And second of all, right off the rip, what is one of your favorite calls, either from this season or from the previous seasons that you've been calling play-by-play for the University of Michigan? Is it the Jake Moody? Is it something from the Big Ten title game?
That's a difficult one. No, I would say last year, AJ Henning's first touchdown in the Ohio State game was probably my favorite one. And everyone's like, oh, your calls were great from the Ohio State game in 21. But I was too much of a fan in that game, and I went back and I listened to it, and I hated it. I hated my call from the Ohio State game last year because I was too much of a fan. And, of course, I'm emotionally invested. I grew up a Michigan fan. But I didn't really like the call. But the first touchdown was my favorite call I've ever had of AJ's touchdown, because that was the first touchdown I've ever called against Ohio State, so that was fun.
You got to call a few more this year. Do you do away games too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to call a few more against Ohio State this year too.
Yeah, I've called quite a few now. I've been lucky.
Yeah. We were talking real quick before we started recording that heck of an era for you to be doing this. I mean, like we said, any era would be great to be doing Michigan football, but back-to-back Big Ten champs, I mean, pretty cool to be calling play-by-play for this run right here.
Yeah, I've been spoiled because I haven't just been the broadcaster. I'm a manager on the team. So getting to know those guys and getting to know the coaches and hanging out with them, even sometimes outside of the facility, has been a blessing for me. And to go into the broadcast booth and be really the first one, I believe, in the station to call all 12, now 13 and 14 games has been super, super special for me as someone that's grew up listening and going to games. So I've been really, really excited about the opportunity. And it's just kind of, came to the point where we're going to the playoff for a second straight year. So I can't complain.
It's crazy.
I mean, I'm looking at your Twitter, you're going to the Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. You're going to Columbus for Ohio State. I mean, what a great job to have while you're in college. I remember I was working at GVSU for the student newspaper, hated every second of it. So you got a little bit better of a setup than I did. What's your favorite part of the job? Is it the catered meals, at the big house on game day, or what is it?
I mean, the call. I'm always going to say it's the call and being there in the moment for games that as a kid I would beg my dad to try and get tickets to. And now I get to go and I get to sit in the press box. Now I'm a cold weather guy, so I like to sit outside and enjoy the games from the stands and to be a fan once in a while. But that's what the Lions are for me at this point. So go to all those games, and I just enjoy the broadcast the most. And even the prep work before it, I think, is just everything that goes into the broadcast together is exactly what makes it so special for me.
I've been doing high school play-by-play for a long time, since 1985 to be exact. And I was really looking forward to this interview. I like to see the young blood coming up, Jared and Matt. You mentioned it a little bit, the prep, and I found that you can never do too much prep. Tell me a little bit about how you get prepared for a Michigan football game. What goes into it?
Yeah, well, I think I kind of have a competitive advantage over others because I am a manager for the team. And it's hard for me to tiptoe the line between what I can and can't share from the team. And most of the time it's can't share because I really value my job inside Schembechler Hall. But I have the advantage because even when the third, fourth, even fifth string walk-on guys come in, I know who they are. So a lot of these guys are digging deep into the depth charts to see exactly who these guys are as walk-ons and where they're from. And that's just like knowledge ingrained in my head because I have everyday conversations with these guys at football practice. But a little more into the prep, I only do Michigan once or twice a year, and I just update my spotting chart as the season goes. But when it comes to the other teams, I like to watch film. So I get my depth charts by watching film rather than going to YouTube and watching, like Matthew Loves Ball. He posts the games every
Great
week.
channel, man.
Right. And that's where I watch most of my film. And shout out to him. I've never met him in person, never talked to him, but very appreciative of his work. And that's where I get my depth charts from. I watch them and I kind of just sit there and mentally call the game. And I have been guilty of watching maybe too much film in class every once in a while because I'm a student here now. But that's where the prep work comes from. And then I just use rankings websites to see where teams are in their passing, in their rushing, run defense, third down conversions. That's pretty much where all my prep comes from.
I know it takes a lot. I mean, like Ted, he mentioned he's been doing it forever, play by play. And I love seeing, like, you know, just a little inside baseball. Ted called my high school football games, and in our area, we told you we grew up in small town of Corona in mid Michigan. Ted's a legend. I mean, he's not going to say it, but Ted's a legend around there calling high school football games. And it's one of those, like, you know, if you play high school football and he can call your game, it's kind of like cool or whatever. Like, I always liked seeing the pictures that he would share of his prep. I mean, he would have just pictures of, I mean, the rosters and storylines and statistics and stuff.
Spotter boards.
And never called one of my games, Ted. I'm disappointed.
Where were you at when you grew up?
Heartland High School, which is about 30 minutes north of Ann Arbor. I played ball varsity for 3 years and never made the playoffs one time.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, so probably never had Ted the sports guy call one of your games, but
nope.
I was
lucky.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's impressive. I can't imagine. So I was trying for a high school game. That's the prep that Ted puts into it. I can't imagine everyone's on different levels, but you know, for Ohio State, Michigan, for Michigan State, I mean, are you putting hours in? Because you're still a student too, you know. Like, I mean, how much prep are you actually putting into this?
To be quite frank, like, that's my relaxing time. Like, that's when I go and get, like, it sounds a little bit odd sometimes to some people, like, why are you drinking tea? I go and get a glass of tea because my voice gets tired pretty easily nowadays. And I'm sitting there just reading the game notes. I try to read through pretty thoroughly to try and get some nuggets to use just in case I can. And I would say anywhere between 5 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
I would say, and that includes watching film. So, I mean, I just grabbed it out of my binder, but this is kind of a look at what I had from the Purdue game the other day. There's some notes jotted on top of it, and this is just simple stuff, but that's pretty much what I had. And I always make sure to write "have fun." Wow.
Yes.
There it is. Have fun.
You got to.
You always make sure to try and write "have fun" on there because sometimes this job can get taken a little bit too seriously, and I want to do it for a career. And I'm a little bit too hard on myself when I go back and critique it, but that's still kind of a learning curve. So I always make sure to write "have fun" just in case I start to get a little frustrated. That's kind of where that comes from.
So what's it like at the Big Ten championship game? I mean, watching it on TV, I'll be honest, you know, they haven't been the best games the last 2 years. Us as Michigan fans have loved it. But it just looks like a blast. It's a big time atmosphere. It looks like the crowd's really into it. I mean, what's it like compared to maybe your general, you know, Michigan versus whoever during the regular season? How does it compare?
Yeah, I would say if we were at home at the Big House, it's still pretty cool because we are spoiled at Michigan Stadium with our own booth. And then we really don't get that anywhere else in the Big Ten. I think the only other school that we really get our own booth is Penn State and Maryland. Otherwise, we're usually outside. We were shoulder to shoulder with the Ohio State broadcasters. And, I mean, they were really nice guys and nothing against Ohio State's broadcasters. But, like, we were pretty much rubbing shoulders, and I felt kind of bad. I had to turn down and go like this and make a couple touchdown calls because I talked to these guys for like an hour and a half before the game, and I don't want to just rub it in because I'm yelling touchdown Michigan right next to them. But I would say the Big House is the best experience for me, but then Indianapolis is like, wow. Like, that is really darn cool because we're kind of in a similar spot on the field, maybe about 20 yards to the left in the end zone in comparison to the big house. But like that's a professional NFL booth.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool because we have all the tricks and the knickknacks that you could possibly ask for, like the crowd mics and the ref mics that we wouldn't get on the road anywhere else except for really at home. So we're really spoiled when we go to Indy, and the crowd noise just like, it's not like the big house, where the big house can be kind of quiet at times because it's such an odd shape, but the sound in Indy comes straight up to you. And so we really didn't even need like gnats if we really didn't want to, because the crowd was so loud, especially the Michigan crowd this past Saturday. So it was just one heck of an experience before and then the game and then after. It was all into one, and I couldn't believe it, back-to-back years. And like you said, Jared, the games haven't been great, but the first halves have been.
Yeah.
But the just experience of being there is really second to none at this point, except for maybe the playoff. And like I said, I've been spoiled with that too.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I won't use the term jealous, but I will say, even at 66, I am definitely envious of what you get to do, man. I mean, it's Michigan football, for God's sakes. This is incredible. You know, I got my love for Michigan football. You guys won't even be able to relate to this. Back when in the 60s, okay, there might be one or two Michigan games actually on television. You know, we had to rely on radio, and we had the greatest of all time, Bob Ufer, pumping through the speakers, describing Michigan football. And if that didn't fire you up and make you become a Wolverine, even if you didn't go to school there, it's unbelievable. So kudos to you, young man. This is just great that you're able to do this. But my question for you is, since you're a manager on the team also, and you know all the players, what about Coach Jim Harbaugh? I mean, man, he's got to be something to deal with on a day-to-day basis, huh? In many ways, probably.
Yeah, I've spotted the ball for him a couple of times, and that's been the most butterflies I've ever had in my stomach that you would even be able to imagine. But, I don't say this a lot, and especially because I don't want to get in trouble being a manager. But, a lot of people kind of consider him a little bit odd and maybe a little weird in the media, but he is one of the nicest guys that you could be around. And he will have genuine conversations with you. It's not like he's just going to blow you off because he's got millions of dollars. He's got the title of head coach at the University of Michigan. He'll stand there with you, and it's kind of funny. The managers, we play Michigan State. That's like our Super Bowl 7-on-7 football. We played at the Big House this year, and we won for the first time since 17. And
that'd be so fun. That'd be so fun, by the way.
Yeah, he came up to us the next week, and he was like, "So I heard you guys won a little football game this past week." And we were like, "You know what, Coach? Yeah, we did." We all get pretty nervous talking to him. And then all of a sudden he comes up and he asks us about our 7-on-7 game. He's like, "Man, I got to break down some game film then, huh?" We're like, "Coach, you might have to."
Nice. That is cool to see because, like you said, I mean, we see all the stuff in the media, whatever direction that goes. But, hearing from former players and people who know him personally, most of the time that's what you hear. Just a super nice, genuine guy. Actually, a funny story. One of my friends, like Harbaugh has his personal email just like out there. And one of my friends, like for the hell of it, shot him an email, said something like, "My son is getting into football and, I'm excited. You got any advice for me?" And Coach Harbaugh personally replied to him and gave him like 2 paragraphs of like, "So excited your son's getting into football. This is what you should do." And, gave him some tips and stuff like that. And my buddy was just like, he actually like replied to my email. Like, that's just,
that's cool.
Kind of crazy because he's probably got millions of emails.
Right.
But earlier you brought up that sometimes you drink some tea. I don't know if that's what you got in your solo cup right now, but
yeah, it's not a great look, especially on a podcast, is it? That's just the cups we have in the house.
It's all good. It's all good. That you sometimes you got to rest your voice. I mean, I hope we're not straining your voice right now. You got a big call this weekend, or actually, no, you got like 3
I've
weeks
got a
off.
break for a couple of weeks now. I got lucky.
I was gonna say you got a few weeks off. I sent you a link. So we interviewed Jesse Goldberg Strassler. He does play-by-play for the Lugnuts, among a bunch of other things.
Yeah, great.
And one of the things that he said that really stuck out to me that I hadn't really thought of, Ted has talked about it before when talking about play-by-play and, learning things, figuring things out, through your career, figuring out that you just got to talk. When you're earlier in your career, you might try and like, I want to have this voice, or I want to have like a Gus Johnson voice, or I want to, whatever. And Jesse told us, like, that was one of the biggest things for him, was learning how to talk, teaching himself how to talk. You know, when you're sitting there doing a 3.5 hour, 4 hour game, your voice is going to get tired. Have you, started to learn that kind of stuff? Have you practiced? Do you sit there in your room, look in the mirror and, practice your voice in your calls? Or are you just turning the mic on and letting it go?
The funny story I always tell when I get asked that question is the way I taught myself to broadcast games, besides just listening, because I grew up to Dan Miller, the Lions broadcaster.
Yeah.
That's like my idol. I consider him a mentor too. We've had some pretty good conversation, but grew up listening to him, and I would right now on the Odyssey app, I just screen record. Maybe I'm not allowed to do that, but I just screen record. I go back, I study, and I listen, and I write down what he says and the diction of like what the words mean in that moment. Then I go back and I watch the highlights, and I'm like, okay, he stiff arms at the 35-yard line, angling right. And I kind of take that away, and I'm like, okay, now let's put that into the word bank and use that when it's time to go. But the funny story I was going to bring up is I taught myself how to broadcast games by playing Madden on the Xbox. Like I would just sit there and I would play, and as I'm winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl with the Detroit Football Lions, I'm sitting there calling the games. And I would always bring in like different players with difficult names.
Right.
That way, I would say I was a big Matthew Stafford fan, so I never traded him away. I was winning Super Bowls when he was 50. And I would bring in guys with some tougher last names. And I would say, throws caught right side by X player. Right. And that's kind of how I taught myself to do it. I would do like 2 or 3 short games, and then I would rest my voice for a day, and then I would do the same thing the next day, even without a call that weekend. So I still kind of do the same thing, except I'll listen to Lions games now, screen record it, go back and listen to it. And as Dan Miller says it, like 10 seconds later, I'll try and repeat it, but make it in my own voice because I don't want to copy him.
Sure.
So that's a little bit of how I, number one, practice, and 2, how I try to rest my voice. This past week was hard. Because I had a 103-degree fever. So I lost my voice completely until Thursday. So I didn't talk all week until Thursday. And then Friday was the day I had to start practicing because I was like, I don't want to go in dry to the Big Ten championship game. I just can't do it. So I drove myself to Indianapolis and was just practicing my calls on the way there because I didn't want to be unprepared.
Right. I just real quick, I know Jared's wanting to jump in. Like people don't think about that. I don't think. I mean, I did the same thing. I'm not doing play-by-play like you guys, but when I used to play NCAA football and Madden growing up, I would be like in my head or even sometimes out loud calling the game. I don't know if it's just a sports fan in me, but people think like, oh, I could do that. Turn the mic on. I can talk about football. I could call a game. I could listen to Joe Buck. I could do what he does. It's not as easy as it sounds, man, to be able to do that for 3.5 hours, 4 hours, whatever. It's an art for sure.
Yeah, we play commercialless. We're a commercialless station because we broadcast on YouTube. So we have to keep the broadcast going through the media timeouts, which is one of the hardest things possible because, number one, what do you talk about for about 3.5 minutes at a time, 4 times per quarter a lot of the time, especially, Pete's on Saturday night, the media timeouts were everywhere.
Yeah.
And you just got to kind of just banter back and forth with your color commentator. Sometimes, like this year, since I was the head of football, I tried to implement like a studio host where we could bring in a third headset and try to talk through the media timeout with a scoreboard update, or if there's any kind of injury updates that we can add. Michigan never really releases injuries, so that was kind of difficult to do, but that's just something that we try to do to rest our voices throughout the call, especially if I'm on all 4 quarters, because that gets difficult.
Looking ahead to the college football playoff, obviously it's going to be exciting to be calling that. Hopefully we can get a win this year. How do you feel going into the TCU game, and then maybe ultimately, maybe you don't want to look too far ahead to the national championship, but seems like the boys are ready to play. How do you feel watching them?
Yeah, I think in comparison to last year at the Orange Bowl against Georgia, I think that we match up with TCU a lot better because last year I was a little nervous going into the game, rightfully so, or playing against Jordan Davis, but a little nervous about going up against their front 7 and against their offensive line. Although Michigan won the Joe Moore Award for best offensive line, I think they should win the award again this year.
Yeah.
But Georgia's front 7 and their offensive line were so strong. And I was like, out of all the teams in the country, maybe them and Alabama are the 2 teams that would rival us up front. And that was absolutely the case because Stetson Bennett had all day to throw a lot of the time, especially on that first offensive drive where they marched down. Brock Bowers was special and he went and scored. But I think the script is different this year against TCU because the Big 12 has kind of reverted back to that whole spread offense kind of thing. And I'm not sure TCU has seen a team exactly like us. They've played similar, but not exactly like Michigan, where they're not afraid to smash you in the mouth for 60 minutes at a time. Yeah. So I think that's what TCU is going to get a heavy dose of. And I mean, we have the week off this week, which is a little bit crazy from practice and not doing anything at Schembechler Hall. So I'm looking forward to seeing like what Michigan ends up doing to prepare for them because I have an idea of what TCU is going to try and do. And to be quite honest, I think it's going to be a little bit like Purdue's game script where Sonny Dykes will take kind of a coin of Jeff Brom and there might be some trickery. There might be a little bit of odd play calling from TCU because they're dynamic and the quarterback is super good. They've got a good running back and, of course, the star receiver. So I think they'll be ready, and I think this matchup is much, much better on paper compared to Georgia last year.
I don't think anyone matched up with Georgia last year.
No. They're on a level of their own last year, man.
I can't tell you how bad I want to see a rematch in the national championship game. I don't know if it'll happen, but man.
A rematch with who? With Ohio State or Georgia?
Ohio State. That's the matchup I want, man.
Say. It sounds he comes from the generation that it's all Ohio State. It's all about Ohio State.
Listen, at that point, just move the game back into the Midwest.
Amen. Hey, as Matt said in the when we were talking off air before we got on, we're all over the place with questions. I want to go back a little bit to what the press box is like when you're doing a game. Mm-hmm. I mean, I caught your highlights, and I'm going to start following you now, definitely, and catch the games. Do you have a color guy? Is there a spotter? How's it operate in the booth for you?
Yeah, all I have is a color guy. So
okay, just like high school.
Say that again.
Just like high school games. That's me and a color guy, and that's it.
Yeah, it's just a color guy. Once in a while, when I'm not on the call and I give the second half or the first half, I always do the second half Big Ten games, first half in the non-conference, unless I have the whole 4 quarters, which is always ideal for me because I love calling games. But I'll try to spot for others because like their eye and their knowledge of the team just isn't at like the same level because I'm at practice every day. So like I said, competitive advantage. But no, once in a while, I'll get a little bit of help from a good friend of mine that's usually in the broadcast booth as well. But just a color guy. Usually it's Adam Bressler, who's the executive director of WCBN, who just does a fantastic job of leading this group that's gotten a lot bigger throughout the last couple of years since COVID knocked us down for that whole 2020 year. Yeah, right. But just a color guy. So I'm lucky. I try to not depend on binoculars a lot to try and pick up the opposing team, but I prepare enough throughout the week, I would say, to be comfortable going in there and doing it on my own if I had to.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is cool. I mean, even just, you're a fan. You said you grew up, a lifelong Michigan fan. Yeah. So, you get a little wrapped up. I personally, so I've been at ESPN for over 13 years, almost 13 years now. I worked in local news for a few years before I came to ESPN. So I feel like I've been in the business for a decent amount of time now.
Sure.
I say all the time, I am not old school. I know the old school thing is Ted maybe still subscribes to this, that like, your fandom isn't supposed to come into your call. People aren't supposed to show any bias, even if, the Homer calls, the Hawk Harrelson calling the White Sox game. And he's not saying a word when the Tigers would walk him off. He's not saying anything. White Sox lose, broadcast done. I think it's fine bringing the fandom into it. I think it's fine. I know you got to be professional. I know that, but like, you're a fan, like you're a Michigan fan. Of course, that fandom is going to come out. Like, do you try and toe that line? You don't want to be fanboy, but you're a Michigan fan. When Michigan's whooping on Ohio State, you're going to be excited, right?
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what I said earlier about being disappointed after the 2021 Ohio State game, because I had the opportunity to make one of the biggest calls ever when actually a good friend of mine, David Ojabo, sacked C.J. Stroud at the end of the game.
Right. I mean, Gus Johnson had that call, right?
Yeah, no, he took all my glory in that one, right? But, no, David sacked C.J. and like I was speechless because I was at the last game Michigan beat Ohio State in 2011 with my dad in the stands, and I knew he was down there with my brother, and Ojabo sacked him. and I kind of went speechless, which was like something that never really happened to me because I was like, oh my God, like we're going to
do
win.
it.
And the only thing that left my voice was like I yelled Ojabo pretty much. And I listened back to it and I didn't even put it in the highlight tape of that game because I was like, Zach, you're not on TV right now.
Yeah.
Who knows what Ojabo did? Did he trip and fall and eat turf? I don't know. Obviously, he sacked him. I mean, people could tell that I was excited, but I was disappointed in that call because I was too much of a fan in the moment. And ever since that point, I was like, okay, I got to make sure in that moment I stay composed and calm. And I would say I've done a good job since then. There have been a couple of moments where maybe my voice gets a little bit too loud because I'm excited at the point. I think the loudest point this year was Rutgers when Michael Barrett picked off Wimsatt a second time and brought it back for a touchdown. That was just loud, but people could still tell what was going on. So
right.
I do try to toe the line enough to the point where the listeners still know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's see. I got one more for you. So
Go ahead.
I just can't get over how great of a job this must be, while you're still in school. But obviously, you're going to be graduating soon. What's next for you? What is it? Do you plan on maybe going to the minor leagues, like trying to get a job that route, or what's the most likely route for a play-by-play guy like you?
Yeah, I've actually tackled that this past week, actually. So I have now spent 2 summers in the Northwoods League doing summer collegiate league baseball. I was in Duluth in 2021 with the Duluth Huskies, and then I was in Madison, Wisconsin with the Madison Mallards in 2022 this past summer. And I'm actually going to go back. So I just signed my contract to go back to the Mallards and call 72 plus more baseball games, 36 at home, 36 on the road, radio style. The home games are on TV because I do want to learn how to do the TV side of things, although I love the radio, especially for football. So I think once I knock out Madison for that last summer, it's going to try to be a full push on college football because I think I have the ability to go and do college football somewhere, maybe at a lower level first doing play-by-play. But if it's something like Learfield and going to be a studio analyst, I think that'd be a good fit for me to start and then see soon, hopefully, to try and get a new role wherever that may be. It's not going to be at Michigan. That's the ultimate goal, is to get back to Michigan, but it's obviously not going to be right away.
Right.
So doing something along those lines to start, I think, is going to be the number one thing for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, we are super impressed, man. I mean, we appreciate you taking the time out and joining us. You have 3 new fans, that's for sure.
Appreciate it.
And don't forget us down the road. We might poke you for another appearance or 2 down the road.
Always.
Well, before we let you go, and we appreciate all the time, tell our listeners and followers the best way to catch up with you.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was on a podcast with Blue by Nandi. That's why I have my @ right next to my name. But right there, Zach Linfield. I try to post my highlights every Monday following the games, and highlights for the Iowa game just went up, or excuse me, Iowa last year. For the Purdue game just went up today, Monday. So that it's been such a good time with you guys, and throughout my 2 years of calling Michigan football, I transferred into Michigan, so I didn't get to do any games before that. So it's been a really fun ride, and especially for my senior year, I hope that these boys can put us out the right way, although I'm already extremely thankful to that group that we've done that at the Big Ten championship game, gone to Ohio State. I've called 2 the games, and they've won both of them. So I don't think I could have had much better of a start of calling Michigan games until hopefully I get back in that booth someday.
Not bad.
Well, you got it made now. You got the 3-point pod boost. It's going to get it done.
Right. It's a resume booster.
That's right.
There you go. Well, we appreciate it again, Zach. Thanks again.
Ted.
All right, guys, before we get to Tedtertainment this week, I just got to tell you this little thing. Remember we had Jesse on, and he invited me up to the broadcast booth?
Oh, yeah.
No diss to Jesse whatsoever, but if Zach ever invited me to go sit in the booth with him doing a Michigan game, I am there. I guarantee it. And I think you 2 guys would be there too, probably, right?
Yeah, I'll go be a spotter if he wants a spotter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, I feel like that position of a spotter for him could have been filled pretty easily with any Michigan student. But
yeah, I would.
It would be a very funny visual to see you assisting on a Michigan student broadcast to help.
Assisting, hell, I'd say I'd have to at least do a series. Come on.
All right. Yeah, like do the like when they're playing like Toledo and just
I
be
don't
like,
care.
just give me one series. Just give
Hell,
me
if I
one.
could
Give me
do
this is my
one,
chance, coach. Put me in. I'll be at ESPN in no time.
if I could do one play on radio of Michigan football, are you kidding? My life would be complete. They might as well bury me and put me away.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, call me crazy. I thought you had done a Michigan. I guess you just always would go down there to talk to Bo for
Yeah.
whatever the radio show, but it was never actually broadcasting a Michigan game.
No, never did a game. Went to the press box, did the press conferences and all that stuff down on the sidelines,
Yeah.
walked off the field right next to Bo one time.
Right.
But no, never did play by play. That would have been a dream. That's kind of why I kind of pushed him to say, hey, don't give up on it. Go for it. Go for
Yeah.
whatever it takes, if that's your dream. I
I
really
mean, the
do
thing
believe
is,
that.
you're building your resume, you're building your
Yes.
reel. Jared knows about that. You're building a reel. He's got Michigan football games on his reel. So
Absolutely.
I mean, that's as good
You
as
know
it
what?
gets.
I think he's smart. He's smart, but because he posted it on social media.
Yep.
Smartest thing he's
Absolutely.
doing right now. I mean, calls a good game, posts the clips, like you said, every Monday. I mean, you want to grow yourself, that's the fastest way right there.
That's
Yep.
the future for sure. But radio will never go away. It'll
Yeah.
always be there. You listen to a good play-by-play guy doing a college or pro football game, it's damn near being there. They're so good at it. And a lot of times you're not able to watch it on your television.
Right.
You might be driving somewhere.
I
So
was going to say people are always going to be traveling.
Right.
So radio is always going to be a thing. It is cool to see.
yeah, well, best of luck to Zach. It was great talking with him. And we'll talk a little entertainment right after this.